And welcome back to the Way of the Wandering Wizard. I am, as always, Robert Andrew Meredith Kennedy, although most folks know me as Bob the Wizard. And I am a pure and open channel for the finest vibrations of divine love and light, made manifest here, in service to Gaia and those who travel with her. In my last little video I was waxing lyrical about my impending arrival in a frame, getting completely tongue-tied over the limb reconstruction unit at King's College Hospital. So today's little episode goes out, particularly as I've just visited the team on Friday, to these guys, the miracle workers. So if anybody's watching this and you are in a frame, soon to go in a frame, or undergoing some kind of limb reconstruction, please watch it to the end. I've never said this before. It's not that there's triggers, but this is going to be an open-hearted sharing of my journey. High points and low points. So, but without too many gory details, probably. So there you go. You have been informed, if not warned. So, my first visit, the pain had got intense. Obviously it was an underlying infection of some form. I'd been referred to King's, and thankfully, whether it's through my brother's contacts or the frequent flyer miles, I was seen very quickly. Within a week or so I was in King's, doing the journey that I've just made, hobbling off on crutches on the train, and arrived in clinic, where I was introduced to my consultant, the great Om, as he shall be known. After a prod and a poke around and an x-ray, it was clear that there was an underlying issue, and I was diagnosed with an infected malunion, as it's so nicely called. Basically the infection was there, the bone hadn't healed correctly, and the only course forward was surgical intervention, the first stage of which was to be removing of all of the existing metalwork. As it was going to take some time, King's is busy, specialist hospital as well as the huge A&E that it is. Would it be possible to get the work done locally? Thankfully there was a great rapport between my consultants, and so very quickly my work seemed to get handed between King's and Tunbridge Wells. And within a very short space of time I was back in Tunbridge Wells Hospital, not quite the same ward, not quite the same room, but ready for the removal of all the metalwork that had only been put in, some 6 months, 7 months before. Well, the operation went fairly successfully, from what I'm told. I awoke in a large purple cast with a slight bend in my leg, or the lower part of the leg, and pretty much from my hip off to my foot. And the operation had gone well. They'd managed to remove the great metal tibial nail that ran right the full length of my leg. So most of my previous surgery had been done, most of my metal work was out, and I was put onto courses of antibiotics. With the metal work out, it was decided that my leg, obviously having been through an operation, that I'd need a replacement cast put on. Now, the lad, Aid, bless him, a good friend, who'd actually done a lot of work early on when I first had the accident, building a back slab for my leg, just basically something to try and hold my foot up when I was hobbling around with my foot operation. So we were aware we'd been chatting. He was sad to see me back in under care, so to speak, that the operation hadn't gone well. Him himself, as a biker, had had similar injuries, shortened legs, and so by dint of resonance, planning, universal chance, whatever you want to call it, it was what an opportunity to have somebody there who absolutely understood bones, understood legs, understood bikes. When on arrival at the ward he took one look at the state of the slightly twisty cast that had been put on in theatre. Now, no judgment, obviously my muscles contracted, things had moved. Oh, and I was out for the count. So I was wheeled off down to the plaster suite, gas and air on hand, whereupon the old cast was cut off. The lovely Sam and Aid managed to put me into a spanking purple cast with a perfect alignment. By use of Sam's ample charm, shall we say, as she straightened my leg and they basically wrapped me up. It was a fine job. He cut, as always, mechanic that he is, a nice square window that lined up beautifully with what I was to see eventually, once the packing came off, as rather a large hole in my leg. In the process of removing the damaged bones and fragments and bits and pieces, I had undergone what was called a debridement. Basically, it looked like they'd apple cored my leg. I was somewhat stunned, thinking that I would probably live the rest of my life with what was technically an inkwell in my leg, only to be reassured by the nurses that within weeks and months that wound would literally heal itself back up to the surface. And apart from the surface scarring, I wouldn't even know that it had been that deep. I must have looked slightly unimpressed, but I was definitely assured that the body would heal. So I set my mind to that as well. While fresh packing's on, the next stage before I could make my way back home, ready to face in time or going into a frame, was that I needed to have the wound, what had been taken away. I now needed antibiotics to back up the process. Now, this was, to me, effective. It would have to be intravenous antibiotics. I'd already been on a lot in hospital. It was the only way it was ever going to clear up enough to have the operation. Now the choices are that you're either in hospital all the time for the IV, which is just not ties up a hospital bed. And so I was to be fitted what they call a PICC line. Basically, a long line that goes into my arm, is threaded up through the veins until it rests just above your heart. Now, this was the first of my operations where I was awake. But thankfully, my brother was with me to hold my hand while I was wheeled into the theatre. It's a little colder than I was expecting. But I went through my usual pre-meds. And I basically watched as a small hole was cut in my arm and watched on the fluoroscope as it was threaded, keyhole surgery style, up through. There was a point where I was told to put my head down. Well, I got up to look and was told I definitely needed to put my head down or it might well end up poking my brain if they could find it. Well, head dutifully tucked down in. The line looked like it was in place. And then comes the test. Some ice cold sailing. As it felt like the cold hand of death for a fraction of a second. It was like, oh, I felt that. A sensation that I was to get used to. Not the cold hand of death, but certainly the IV flushing in. It's the most effective place to deliver it. It delivers all of the antibiotics throughout the body. PICC line in place, working well. I was discharged back home to the care of the district team, where I spent the next few months. And basically, there wasn't a muck. I couldn't move a lot. Full casts on your leg, just immobilising. Your leg out straight the entire time. So I'd pretty much spend my days sitting on the sofa. To all the friends that would pop round and keep my spirits up, thank you. And that's a social network. Old friends, old bikers that have been through similar, just dropping round from time to time. That's a way to start your recovery. I discovered the joys of box sets. Well, wanting to bore you, I certainly weighed my way through Battlestar Galactica and many, many box sets. There was not a lot else to do. I couldn't sit at a computer. I couldn't really focus that well. But I was feeling so much better in myself. The antibiotics, the underlying infection was clearing and I just felt more me. In due course, the nurses were right. I watched week on week as they measured the hole, as very gradually my body literally filled the hole up until a nice slight dimple but a surface scar. I was having blood tests regularly and showing improvements. And so it came, just after my birthday of all things, that my infection markers were clear and I was deemed fit to go to court, or to go all the way up to King's, to be fitted with my frame. And so, this will be part one of the frame journey, preparation for. The second part, I shall introduce you to my frame. Thank you as always for listening to challenging, but overall forging experience in my life. Take care, go well, and blessed be.